Greetings, everybody. This is David Avocado Wolfe, and welcome this morning. I've got a great guest. For some of you, it may be the afternoon. I'm in a chocolate factory here in California, and we have just been having an awesome time in California. Lots of rain, and California is that kind of place where you just add water and everything turns into paradise. And we've also got a cleanse coming up, so I wanted to mention that a few times throughout the call, but it is beginning on Friday, and the actual kickoff calls at 6 p.m. Eastern. We'll put the links above or below on how to jump into that cleanse with us. It's a 2-week cleanse, and we're going to have a goal of losing at least 10 pounds, hopefully 15. And if you want to, at the very end, we're going to give you some instructions on how to go further, or making sure that you get back on track with your normal lifestyle in the right way. As you go into a cleanse, so you go out slowly and easily and steadily. Thanks, everyone, for joining us all over the world. We're going to have folks on the call, and I've got the most incredible guest, one of my favorite people, a real heartfelt activist, somebody who's just going after it. And I met her the first time in person was at a longevity conference, but her work and her amazing reputation preceded her. She is doing incredible work exposing food ingredient lies. So with no further ado, I'd love to welcome Vani Hari. How are you?
Hey, David. Thank you so much for having me.
You're an author. You're just an incredible wealth of knowledge when it comes to reading labels. You know, at this point, what these food companies, as Paul Stitt called them, the food giants, what they've been up to. And you're alerting people. And I just wanted to congratulate you on your new book. And I want to show everyone your new book. This is the one to check out, Feeding You Lies by Vani Hari. Check that out. And Vani is a young mother, absolutely awesome in her research, finds the time to really dig up everything of importance in terms of what we need to know about ingredient labels. It's just awesome. So Vani, tell us what's happening in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, becoming a food activist was definitely something that happened. I didn't plan it. It was by accident. I realized that I had a passion for researching what I had thought was healthy that actually wasn't. There are so many foods that I used to eat that because they had a certain amount of calories, or the companies claimed that I was quote unquote eating fresh, I believed these food companies. I outsourced all my decisions to the food companies, and the food companies largely are, running the show, teaching, educating what they call educating the public about what's really healthy and what's not. And we've let go of our control and given it up to them. And it's time to take back control, because we live in a world with so much disease, and so many people are sick, and so many people are like I used to feel, walking around like a zombie, and I know that they can feel a different way. And that is why I do the work that I do, and the reason why I work every single day tirelessly to inform the public about the truth about the food that we're eating. And people just, there's this large assumption that everything on grocery store shelves is safe. And because the FDA, rubber stamps it, saying, these are generally regarded as safe ingredients, that we should be eating them. But what people don't realize is that the food companies themselves create these chemicals. Actually, 99% of the chemicals that have been invented over the last 50 years or so have been invented for one sole purpose, and that is to improve the bottom line of the food industry. They have not invented these chemicals and ingredients to improve our health or to provide some additional nutritional component. It's actually just invented to improve their bottom line and produce more money for themselves. And so once we recognize that and realize that all of these additives that we're putting in our body, being part of this massive experiment, is not serving our health, and when we start to remove these additives from our diet, our bodies start to realize what it actually feels like to be human and feel great and full of energy. That is when people will start to wake up to what's happening, and that is how we change the world, and how we start to demand food companies produce healthier, safer, and real food alternatives to what they have been serving us over the last 50 years.
I think what you're doing, Vani, is just you're so ahead of your time, and I'm just impressed with what you've been able to accomplish and developing such a strong reputation for helping us to survive grocery stores. It's crazy what's going on with labels. I want to just show everyone your book. This is Feeding You Lies by Vani Hari, and she's joining us all the way from North Carolina today. I'm David Avocado Wolfe, by the way, over here in California. And this is just incredible, some of the stuff that's in this book. And I wanted to probably start with a personal story, which is your father dealing with diabetes. And then the lessons you learned, you talk about it in this book, and then what we can all learn, because diabetes is a mega disease, or really it's a syndrome today. It's just incredibly pervasive and gotten into everyone's lives. It seems like every family I know has been touched by diabetes. But go ahead, let's take it there. And
yeah, my father developed type 2 diabetes several years ago and has had so many trials and tribulations with this disease, and it's a man-made disease. So that's the first thing we have to recognize. Type 2 diabetes is a man-made disease. This is not something that you're born with, that you get. This is because you ate really terribly and believed what people were telling you about what was healthy, and you would eat it. And that's what my dad did. He was very trusting of the American food supply. He came from India as an immigrant. He came here to the United States. And the first thing he introduced my mom to after they had an arranged marriage was the McDonald's hamburger. He says, if we're going to live in America, we're going to eat like Americans. And that's exactly what he did. And so he developed type 2 diabetes based on the American standard diet. And one of the first things that he started to change about his diet is he said, okay, well, I can't eat sugar because sugar affects my insulin level. So I'm going to buy these products that are diabetic friendly, that say that they have no sugar or sugar free, when they're really, he basically was eating a lot of foods with artificial sweeteners. So the sorbitol, the saccharin, the aspartame, all of those, the stevia, all of the different artificial sweeteners that actually, trick your brain into thinking you're consuming some calories, but actually spike your insulin level just like you would if you were eating sugar. And there's been so many studies done on aspartame and saccharin, the sweet and low and the equal that you see out there. That is in everything that's in Diet Coke and other, things that appeal to people who want to try to eat healthier or think that they're, if they consume 0 calories, they're doing their body good. But these chemicals start to trick the brain and react in the body the same way as you would if you were to eat sugar in some stance. And actually some suggest, and the science is looking a little bit interesting in this, that sugar is actually healthier for you to have than artificial sweeteners if you're even not even a diabetic. So it's really interesting. I already have trolls here on here.
I just popped one up. I just put it up there. I was like, somebody's already trolling you, and I just popped it up on the screen. So let me jump back in.
Well, I want, show me the data that argues that artificial sweeteners is completely healthy and not going to spike your blood insulin level or trick your brain into actually creating an addictive behavior and actually increasing appetite, because all the science is there. This isn't made up stuff. And what is really interesting is because I'm on the forefront telling people the cutting edge health information and going against these corporations, which their sole purpose is just to make money, they want to do whatever they can to stop me. We have changed dozens of billion-dollar food corporations for the better, for the work that I've presented on foodbabe.com and the community who I call the Food Babe Army, who has carried and signed petitions and called companies and not only care about their health, but they're willing to go out on the line and do something about it. We have changed these food corporations, and they are scared of us because you know what? We can start a petition, we can write an article, we can do something to educate the public very fast, and things will start to change, and that loses the food corporations tons of money. And so they can't attack me and my message. So what they do is they try to call me names and they label me and try to paint me as different things. And that's exactly what's happening here with this Elise person who is putting, by the way, she's putting links to the personas that the food industry has created to go against me. Iowa farm babe, food science babe. No, there was only one food babe, and that was me, Vani Hari, who started in 2011. And the new babes that came across after that have just been there to take me down, which, you know what, I'm still standing. And this book is a bestseller, and it's getting out to the public, which is just incredible. And so I thank you, David, for sharing this with your readership and your audience, because this is how we're going to change the world. When we get out the lies that the food industry has told us year after year to try to trick us into buying their products, to telling us that, you know what, it's gluten-free, or it's fat-free, or it's sugar-free. Whatever you see on the front of the package is there just so that you can be there to buy that product. It's marketing to catch your eye. And once people recognize that and they realize they need to turn over the package and actually read the ingredient label and look at the ingredients and become their own health and food investigator. That is really what I wish to happen as a result of people reading this book, is that they become so smart and so savvy about the food industry that they take back control of their health, they stop outsourcing their decisions to other people, and they start to realize a level of health that they never thought was possible.
Thank you for that. It is just incredible what's happening with these food giants. They've resorted to name calling, fake accounts, trolling, and that's telling all of us that we're hitting them in a place that hurts. And it's also telling us all that you're doing your work. Thank you, Vani Hari, for doing this work. It's so important. And you know,
it's funny. One of the things that was so beautiful about becoming an activist and getting attacked in this way is it opened my eyes up to what the food industry is willing to, the food and chemical industry is willing to do to continue lying to us. And I actually share those stories in Feeding You Lies about the different, what they call AstroTurf campaigns, where tons of comments will show up on any article that is written about me in a positive way, or any article about me online, period, where there are like being, these groups of people are being controlled with a rapid response team. And this is something that Monsanto has been known to create. I mean, they have a program that says leave no comment left behind on the internet, that anyone that talks about their chemical Roundup or GMOs.
Isn't it just typical? They just can't handle a free and open debate on their chemicals because they're hiding something. And I think that's what's happening here is we're exposing them. You've been doing a great job exposing these chemicals, and now they're concerned because the word is getting out there. And you know what happens once the word gets out there? All of a sudden the tide turns. Look what's happened to glyphosate with Roundup, and Costco just dropped Roundup yesterday just because of the 2 cancer cases that have now shifted the tide. And so they know what's coming. The chemicals in our food are basically done for. I wanted to go over some of the ones you listed. You've got some wild chemicals in your book. I was reading the list and going through some of this stuff, and the yoga mat chemical is probably my favorite. What is this stuff being used for? Tell us about some of these chemicals, and tell us what to look for on labels.
Yeah, so the yoga mat chemical, azodicarbonamide, is something that thankfully, because of a campaign we started several years ago against Subway to remove this chemical, the bread manufacturers in this country have largely removed it. So it's very hard to find it today. But this chemical was so alarming that other countries had banned it. If you got caught using it in Singapore, you get fined $450,000. And it's a chemical that when it's inhaled, it can cause asthma. So for the factory workers who are creating this bread, it can be an issue. But then when it gets heated inside the bread, it turns into a carcinogen. So this is a very problematic ingredient. And that was just one example on how screwed up the regulatory system here is in the United States, because other countries are safeguarding their citizens against a lot of these chemicals. They have a precautionary principle where they don't allow a chemical in their food unless it's proven safe. Here we have the reverse, where you have to prove harm, and sometimes you can't prove harm until people are dead and in a coffin. And I don't say that lightly, and I'm not saying that as a fear monger, as some people call me, but this is the case with trans fats. Trans fats is known, according to the CDC, to cause 7,000 deaths per year, 20,000 heart attacks. It didn't get banned until just recently by the FDA. So if your dad or your mom or your relative or your friend died of heart disease, could they have died from this chemical in our food? Probably so. But you know what? It doesn't matter, because the food we had to prove this over the last 30 years or so in order to really ban this chemical from our food. Meanwhile, people are dropping dead. So this is the problem with what we have here in America, is we have this system where we rely on the food companies themselves to submit the safety data for a lot of these additives. And the safety data doesn't look at the long-term effects of a lot of these additives. And so for me, when I don't understand or recognize an additive on a label, it's actually really hard for me to do that now because I've become an expert at them. But if I don't recognize something, the first thing I will go do is research that ingredient, because I need to know every single thing I put in my body. You know, at the end of the book, I have a whole glossary of all of these additives that you need to look out for. And azodicarbonamide is just one of several dough-type conditioners you'll find in bread that you really need to be aware of.
I want everyone to see your book here, Feeding You Lies. If you're just joining us right now, I'm David Avocado Wolfe, and I'm speaking to Vani Hari, the food babe. And she has been at the forefront of exposing the crazy amount of chemicals that have snuck into our food supply at the request and creation of the food companies. That's what's so crazy about it. Their own chemical research and development facilities have created all kinds of preservatives, colorings, and what's happened? It's led to a health crisis in America, and Vani is exposing that. And as a result of that, I know how that is. You're getting trolled. I was actually, I think, the most trolled person in the world for a couple of years. So yeah, I totally know what you're dealing with. It is insane, by the way, just for folks who don't know what the trolling can look like. You know, for example, on Twitter at one point, I was blocking and deleting 3 people a minute for 3 days, all day and night, just to give you an idea of like how they descend upon you, and basically they're trying to clog up your feed, trying to disturb your message. And that must mean something. It must mean that we're winning. And and Vani's a young mother. I mean, geez, you're the most like wonderful person. And it just tells you how sinister these characters are behind their ivory towers. You know, they thought they were untouchable. They did think they were untouchable. And lucky for us, we have you, and you're breaking down those ivory walls. It's awesome. Okay, so keep going. Tell us a little bit more about this book and some of the other ingredients to be on the watch for.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other things that I think is really important about this book is that it will teach you to look beyond headlines and things that you see in the media or in social media. You know, what's really sad is that the mainstream media sometimes can just be on the take, or they can get hoodwinked by the food industry. And a good example of this is something that happened recently over the last year is, you know, on social media one day, I mean, it was everywhere. There's a headline that was in the USA Today that said, "Coconut oil isn't healthy and has never been." And this was marketed like crazy. It was in every newspaper. It was on every channel. And when you look behind the scenes of what was behind this headline, you found an organization that sounds so reputable and so credible, like the American Heart Association. When you hear that, you think, oh, this is a group that's looking after America's hearts. But when you look behind the scenes and see who funds this organization and what they've done in the past, like put their seal on Trick cereal, you realize that their mindset and their goal isn't really to tell us the healthiest information in terms of what we really should be eating to protect our hearts. And so what you found behind these headlines is there was 2 individuals that were sitting on the AHH board that were looking at this recommendation to stop eating coconut oil and start eating corn, canola, and soy oil, is that they were being paid by Unilever and the corn and canola industries behind the scenes. And that's how these headlines made it into national media. So this was a major campaign to try to switch America's newfound awareness about cooking oils. And I mean, you knew that coconut oil was really taking over a lot because even Crisco was producing a coconut oil now. And this was very threatening to the corn and canola industry. And so they did whatever they can, and they created this campaign and shifted it through this reputable, credible organization like the American Heart Association. And that's how they get this information out to the public. You know, a journalist who just got out of school may see this and say, okay, I need to write about this. This is from the AHA. They're recommending this new way of eating. And they get completely hoodwinked. And then the general public gets confused about what's actually healthy when coconut oil is actually one of the cleanest, least processed oils that you can actually cook with. And so I take the reader through these examples so you become, again, the smartest, savvy consumer. So when you hear this new health and food information online, you can weed through the bullshit.
That was awesome. I want to read what you wrote here. This is amazing, right? Because they're trying to do this little switch back. Oh, switch back to soybean oil and corn oil. And you wrote this beautiful sentence here that essentially clears it up for all of us. These oils, soybean oil and canola oil, go through an insane amount of processing with 1, chemical solvents, 2, steamers, 3, neutralizers, 4, dewaxers, 5, bleach, 6, deodorizers before they end up in the bottle. And that's just before they end up in the bottle. Once they're in that bottle, then we know they have a super high amount of omega-6 fatty acids. They're inflammatory. They're probably the real cause behind the heart disease epidemic, which was attributed to coke or saturated fat, right? We heard so much of that over the years, but my guess is it's really probably the vegetable oil, in particular soybean oil, cottonseed oil, canola oil, that's really behind these diseases, which do have something in common I want to mention, and that is their capillary diseases, heart disease, stroke, diabetes. Those are all related, actually, and it's from inflammation in the capillaries. And the way I look at it is we've got all these chemicals, the body can't break them down, and they clog up our fine tubules, which are our capillaries. The latest research on heart disease is indicating it's the capillaries that feed our heart. When those get clogged, we have a heart attack because the oxygen can't get there and the lactic acid builds up. And this is such an incredible breakthrough in understanding that, hey, anything that's getting into our tissue has got to be finely broken down, free of chemicals, free of synthetic substances that can't be basically lysed is the word, in terms of cutting through margarine, for example, to be broken down so your body can actually get into small enough particles so it doesn't damage the delicate tubules of our body, otherwise known as our capillaries. I just want to throw that in there because that needs a little bit of voice, right? It's kind of an obvious thing. As we age, we get clogged up or basically if we don't filter, like what you're doing, Vani, is you're a filter. You're helping us filter away the chemicals. And if we don't get a filter, then we become the filter. Your book's a filter.
That's a great way to describe it, David. That is a great way.
Okay, so keep going. This book is extensive, and you just go all out. Give us some of the other highlights that are in these pages.
So one of the other things that I think is really important for people to recognize is that the claims on the front of packages aren't always what they say they are. A really great example of this is Sargento cheese. Sargento cheese has this fancy packaging for their shredded cheese, and they say right on the label, off the block. Now, this is to basically communicate to the consumer that someone shredded the cheese and then just put it in a bag right off the block and given it to you at the grocery store. But what's actually happening when you turn over the package, they're adding cellulose, which is a wood pulp additive that you can add up to like 13% or something in a bag of cheese. And actually, this is an additive that they found recently to start destroying our gut metabolism and our healthy bacteria in our gut and can affect the way our liver processes fat. So again, an obesity issue causing additive. And so this is something that, for people who do eat cheese, I tell them to buy the raw cheese and grate it themselves. But this is another way that food manufacturers try to trick the consumers that they're eating something more natural when they're actually eating something very processed. Another great example of this is a bar that looks really super healthy, like the RX bar. The RX bar, a couple years ago, the CEO of Whole Foods reached out to me, Walter Robb, he's the ex-CEO now, but he said, Vani, what are the new where do you see packaging going with ingredients? Tell me about what you envision. And I said, oh, Walter, the ingredients for every food product is going to start being in big, bold level on the front of the packages. Just wait, because people really are going to start caring about ingredients once they learn the truth about what's in our food. And long and behold, this bar manufacturer came on the scene and they were doing that. And I said, look, oh my goodness, they were at every juice bar. And I said, wow, they're putting their ingredients right on the front. This is great. And then they said, they list 3 egg whites, 6 almonds, a couple dates, and then they put no BS, nothing else in it. And I was like, yes, this is so great. But then I turned over the package and they're hiding ingredients. They're adding natural flavors, which could be a slew of laboratory chemicals. They're using laboratory chemicals to flavor these bars that look so clean and natural and quote unquote, no BS. Well, that's probably why Kellogg's bought this company, but they ended up buying RX Bar and, whatever. But it's, this is stuff that people need to know. That whatever you see on the front of a package, you need to look at the back and need to look at the ingredients. And then the same goes for any labels that you see. A really popular label that has happened to make its way on just about every product, I feel like, at Whole Foods is non-GMO. Non-GMO is important, but what's more important is that you buy organic, because when you buy non-GMO, all you are avoiding is the genetically modified crops. So you're avoiding the genetically engineered corn or soy or canola that has been, created to withstand heavy doses of Roundup, which is very important. But what's even more important is you want to avoid Roundup, right, altogether. And Roundup can be sprayed on conventional crops and can be sprayed on non-GMO crops right before harvest. So wheat, oats, other things that may be non-GMO could still have a heavy dose of glyphosate, which is now considered a carcinogen according to the International Agency for Research in Cancer, and is now, the star in all of these different lawsuits that are happening across the country, linking this additive to cancers. And 2 men now have been awarded millions and millions of dollars as a result of juries deciding that these additives, this herbicide does cause cancer. So it's very important that we avoid that. So when you look at the non-GMO label, the USDA organic symbol needs to be there too, or you're not going to be able to avoid Roundup.
It's just so interesting how the whole system is rigged against us. And I want to talk about that a little bit. By the way, if you're just joining us right now, I'm David Avocado Wolfe. I'm joined right over there by the food babe, Vani Hari, and she's got a new book out, Feeding You Lies. This is the title of her new book, and she gets into it in this book. You're going to find out all kinds of crazy things that are going on with things you thought were safe on labels that really are not. We have an epidemic of health challenges in this country, including an epidemic of autism. One of the things that comes up for me, Vani, about autism is it's toxic overload. You know what I'm saying? Like, why do we have such a spike in autism? It's like, how much aluminum can the body take? How much polysorbate 80 can the body take? How much of the yoga mat chemical can the body take? How, it's just that finally, and these things are showing up, by the way, in utero, and they're showing up in newborn baby umbilical cords. My friend, Professor Mark Cohen, expressed to me that I believe in a study that he supported and backed, they found 276 synthetic chemicals in newborn umbilical cords, which is crazy right there. That is totally nuts right there, and what that means. But he said we would have found 1,000 if we would have tested for 1,000.
Wow.
That's what I heard when I was in Australia. That's where that research was done, and that's the world where all our kids are growing up in. And so what you're doing is absolutely seminal. One thing I do want to say is one of the reasons why we do a cleanse, and we're kicking off our cleanse on Friday. Check the link above or below somewhere in the comments, maybe in the description, to join our cleanse on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. We're going to kick it off. But that's why we do these things, Vani. We have to cleanse our bodies, or else we're going to be in toxic saturation and overload.
Yep, absolutely. What's really kind of sad about the information in this book is that no mainstream media outlet would interview me about it. Like literally, this was a bestseller, was in the top 15 on USA Today's best-selling list, Wall Street Journal bestseller, and nobody was brave enough to reveal this information out to the public, to write about it. And I just want to thank you, David, so much for all the work that you're doing to educate the world about these chemicals and how to become really super healthy. So thank you.
Right on. I mean, I love what you said, though, that, you're outing these major media networks. They're basically, it's fake news. They're bought and sold. It's done. They can't get the message out there. They're incapable of getting the message out there. And luckily we have forums like this where the message can flow. And lucky, even today we still have some modicum of free speech, even though they try with every step to try to block that as well. Tell us a little bit about the life of an activist, a life of a food activist, and just some of the things you've had to deal with, some of the things that drive you, some of the things that make it fun as well, because there's always that other side of the people you help, or the amazing stories that you receive and the magical experiences that you have when you're out probably on tour and you're meeting people.
Yeah, there's a phrase that has really helped me as a food activist stay focused, and it's called "No Mud, No Lotus," and it's by Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a famous Buddhist monk, and it basically means that without struggle, we can't have progress. And so I keep reminding myself that this mission is much bigger than myself, right? No matter how many times that I get attacked in the public, or someone tries to take me down or call me names or write a negative article or try to attack a magazine that puts me on the cover, because that's happened before, where a magazine will put me on the cover and their 4.5 Amazon star rating will go down to 2.5 stars just because they had me on the cover. And at first, that those type of things that would happen would really start to wear on my soul. But what I realized is that this mission, again, is much bigger than myself, and I'm willing to take one for the team to get this mission out there. And, it's for my daughter. She's 2 years old now, and, I want her to know the truth about our food system. I grew up with parents that didn't know the truth, didn't know how to teach me about nutrition, didn't know what was really in the, mozzarella sticks and the Salisbury steak that they were feeding me, or the, Happy Meals that they would get. I am so lucky to be in the position now that I have that knowledge, and I can continue to use my voice to teach the public what's really happening. And so, if you want to know the truth about what's really happening behind the scenes in the food industry, read Feeding You Lies, continue to follow Food Babe, and it's your support and your voice, and you're continuing to spread the word and share this book with the people that you love, and share this information with you love, that's going to change the world and going to eventually expose everything that's happening so the food industry can't hide any longer. They took the playbook right out of the tobacco industry. They even used the same science that the tobacco industry was using to create addiction in food as they did in cigarettes. So, once you realize that, you start to recognize that, I don't want my taste buds to be hijacked by the food industry any longer. I want to take that control back. And I want to make sure that, I know what I'm putting in my body, and what I'm putting in my body and my family's body is real food, and not food that's just created to make the food industry money.
This is like a moment, in time where we really have to stand up, because it's gotten so completely crazy with all the chemicals they've been throwing into all our food that, now we need to make like kind of a radical shift. What are the things that we need to do to shift? What are the best moves we can make? Like for example, okay, we're not going to do corn oil and soybean oil. Which oils do we do? We're not going to buy, food with blue number 1 and red number 40 in it. What do we do instead? So give us a little bit of the to-dos around all this.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, my first book, The Food Babe Way, actually take people through a 21-day habit change where you have to change your habits in order to live in this over-processed world. You can't just continue, unfortunately, living the way we have if you're eating the standard American diet. You have to start new habits. Every single day when you wake up, you need a healthy habit to start with. And, one of the things I do is I start with lemon and cayenne. First thing in the morning, I drink lemon water and cayenne peppers to recharge my metabolism, create an immune boosting properties in my body, stimulate my liver, all of those things, and then I make sure that I eat an abundance of raw vegetables. So one of the habits I have in the Food Babe Way is about making sure 50% of your day is raw. So it's unadulterated food that no one's processed, no one's touched. And for people who don't eat a raw food a lot, they kind of think like, is this going to be hard? Well, it's really not that hard. I mean, you start with breakfast. Say you eat oatmeal for breakfast. Okay, you eat some steel cut oats. Maybe you make it in your crock pot the night before so you can eat the steel cut oats that take normally 25 minutes and they're already ready for you. But you know what? You top that with a bunch of raw fruit, raw nuts, raw seeds. That's 50% of your meal then, right? So it's not really that hard once you realize that you can combine and mix things that you're used to and then add in the raw components. I mean, making sure that the majority of food that you're eating has not been adulterated by the food industry is going to set your whole body up for success. And so one of the other tips that is absolutely necessary is that you learn to cook. I didn't know how to cook until my mid-20s. And that is one thing that I don't want to happen with my daughter. So I involve my daughter whenever I'm cooking something, I show her what I'm putting in. I help her, I show her how to mix things and what ingredients I'm using. Like I grind and make my own flour. So I take out the grinder and I show her what I'm doing. And so, eventually when she's old enough, she'll start to get really in the action and I'm going to involve her every step of the way. I started a garden outside so that she picks and eats her own goji berries right off of the vine. And I don't know many 2-year-olds that know what a goji berry is, but she does. And, she's getting some incredible freaking vitamins from those goji berries that are grown in an organic environment right in my yard. And so I'm bringing her along for the rides as she learns about food and learns that this is just a way of life, that we cook food, we make it at home, we cut it, we bring it in from the farmer's market or our yard. And that is what we need to do.
So it's basically ancient, old, brand new. That's one of the things we like to say is like the best way to make it all brand new again is go back to the way we did it ancient, old times. And ancient, old, brand new is a very excellent, it's an excellent guide. It can guide you. You're wondering like, okay, what do we do about this situation? Go do the way that's ancient, old, and it's also brand new because we don't use it anymore. It usually works. Some of the things that come up a lot is people say, okay, I can't get any of this stuff in my grocery store. Let's talk about farmers markets a little bit. We're coming into springtime here in the Northern Hemisphere. Farmers markets are going to start kicking on all over North America. What are some of the tips about farmers market shopping that you could give us?
So one of the things that I think is really important is you ask your farmer about how they produce the food. Because a lot of times some of the small, tiny farms don't have USDA certified organic seals and things like that, but they don't use any pesticides. So one thing you can do is just ask your farmers how they produce the food. Then you know whether you can trust it or not. And usually the farmer is right there, or the farmer's wife, or the farmer's, the different people who produce the food are right there in the farmer's market. I mean, there isn't a lot of, lack of communication there. I mean, they're right there. I mean, one of the ladies that I get all of my herbs that I plant here in my yard from, I mean, she's the one who creates them, and it's her farm, and she goes and takes them to the farmer's market to sell. And, it's amazing what she does. And if you live in Charlotte, her farm is Windcrest Farms, and she has these amazing herbs, and she's got like organic ginger and turmeric that you can grow in your yard. And it's just amazing what you can grow. And I mean, I think if you have sunlight and some good soil, you can grow just about anything. And so I would say, try to grow some things at home. That's going to be really important. I mean, there's nothing better than walking out on my front patio. I have these above ground planters on my patio, and I have fresh kale growing, and just picking it and making a salad. I mean, there's nothing that tastes better than that.
That's really the best. Grow your own and start with raw ingredients. And if you do those two things, you're in great shape. So same is true with oils. Get your raw organic olive oil, get your raw organic coconut oil, and then you have your raw materials. And that's what I always recommend, is just making it simple. The best way to avoid these ingredients is not to get food that has any ingredients. That's another one.
Right.
Too.
One ingredient foods. And so, I have this, at the end of Feeding You Lies, I have this thing called the 3-question detox that I want people to recognize. If you just ask yourself these 3 basic questions every single time you sit down to eat, you will fundamentally change what you're eating. The first question is, what are the ingredients? If you know the ingredients of everything you're eating and you know what they are, that is a really good thing. Now, if you don't, you got to put the food away, right? Until you know what the ingredients you're eating. And the only way to really know what the ingredients you're eating is to really create that meal yourself. The second thing I want people to do is ask themselves, are these ingredients nutritious? Did you pour sugar all over your oatmeal? That ingredient's probably not nutritious, right? And I just want people to use their common sense here when they look at their plates and what they're eating that day. Are these ingredients nutritious? Or are they chemicals made in a chemical factory made out to make something that you just picked out of a box? Those are the questions I want you to ask. And then the third question is, where do the ingredients come from? Are they coming from a dead processed food? Are they coming from a factory farm? Are they coming from an organic farm? And so when you start to ask yourself these 3 fundamental questions every time you sit down to eat, you start to question what's making up the stuff that you're putting in your body.
Well said. The book is Feeding You Lies. I'm going to get it up there so everyone can see this book. Great book. The latest from Vani Hari, the food babe, who's joined us all the way from, North Carolina. And I'm over here in a chocolate factory. I do want to show you guys what we're up to. Check this out, Vani. Boom. The latest batch of chocolate over here.
Oh, it looks
delicious. We've got 2 batches in right now. And I also have something really cool that I wanted to share with everybody. This is how you can be sure you've got no other like weird stuff in there, like Red Lake 1 or whatever that stuff is, or blue. By the way, Blue Lake, whatever it is, doesn't have nothing to do with no lake. I got news for you guys. Okay, so check this out. Boom, homegrown vanilla. Look at that line.
Oh, that looks delicious. That's funny. One of the things that I created was my own company. It's been almost 2 years now, it's going to be 1.5 years. But one of the things that I wanted to create was like a vegan raw protein, a pea-based protein, and everything that we came across, they were like, no, you need to use vanilla flavor because real vanilla costs so much. And I was like, no, we're not going to use fake vanilla flavor in our products. We're going to use the real deal Holyfield, right? And that is just beautiful, you showing us that, David, because that's exactly what we do at True Vani, my company, is we use the real ingredients. We won't, we will not use any of those synthetic additives and other things that they create in laboratories to really trick the brain into remembering a flavor and create an addiction. We want people to, when they eat our products, to eat real food.
You're the best. So glad to have you with us, and so glad for what you're doing. True Vani is your brand, TRUVANI. Check out the food babe and her new book. We have been blessed to have her on the show here this afternoon and welcoming everybody from all over the world. We've had folks tune in from all over the world. I think we've got most people's questions handled. I'm getting a slow feed here, so I'm not getting the up-to-date questions. But nevertheless, one thing I wanted to mention before we go is we are doing a cleanse, and it's a 2-week cleanse, begins Friday. That's 2 days from now, right on the other side of the weekend. We're going to be all the way in it. We start out with 1 meal a day for the first week, no meals the second week, all liquids. And we're going to challenge ourselves. One of the big detoxifiers, Vani, one of the big ones that I'm into, this is our latest bag for it, 600 capsules in here, activated charcoal. And yeah, this, the slow poisoning of America and the slow poisoning of our bodies, the best remedy we've got is actually charcoal. Interestingly, that's a subject of a new book I'm writing, and it's something we need to be aware of to detoxify ourselves. So when we do a cleanse, we hit the charcoal, heavy. And we see if we can work some of that stuff out of our own filters into those filters, because the filter right there of the charcoal is one of the best filters there is. That's why we have charcoal filtration in our air. We have charcoal filtration in our water filters. And that's something you can actually get into your body and use the charcoal to help filter stuff out of you. Anyway, the details will be somewhere in the comments, either above or below. And you can join us on that call and kick off the cleanse and just say yes to having the best day ever. Any final words, Vani Hari, from your experience, doing all of this work? What are some of the things that people really want to know that we haven't touched on yet? Anything comes to mind?
I mean, I think one of the most alarming things that you'll learn in Feeding You Lies, and the one thing that I think will energize you to really take this seriously, is when you look at an example, and a great example of this is an example of how our food is so much different than food overseas, and how the same food manufacturers, the American food companies, are actually reformulating their products safer and better for citizens overseas. And there's no better example to this than the McDonald's French fries. McDonald's French fries in the UK have 3 basic ingredients: potatoes, oil, and dextrose, which is a little sugar, and then you can add salt after it's fried, so you determine how much salt. Here in the United States, it's a slew of chemicals. One of the chemicals they use is called dimethyl polysiloxane. It's the same ingredient in silly putty. It's an anti-foaming agent. It's actually an ingredient that can be preserved with formaldehyde, according to the FDA, and that there isn't any long-term safety studies on, that is allowed in our food, that McDonald's chooses to use in their food here in the United States, but doesn't overseas, but produces the exact same French fry. So this just makes you crazy, I bet, for people who think that, the American companies are looking after their own American citizens, but instead they're doing something, I think, completely unethical when they figured out how to make their products safer and better overseas, and they don't do that for their own citizens. So, this is another reason why you can't trust the food industry and why you have to take back control.
That is just incredible. I mean, but that's so bizarre that they would send products overseas with less ingredients and less toil and trouble, and leave the toxic products here. But you heard it from the food babe. Vani Hari has joined us for the last 45 minutes. I'm calling in from California, the Sacred Chocolate Factory, and Vani's joining us from North Carolina. Thanks so much, Vani. The book is Feeding You Lies. And this is definitely information the mega food giants don't want you to know about. They will do everything they can, including lying, in order to stop this information from getting out. So pick up this book. Probably the best place to pick it up is from you. Isn't that right, Vani? Give us your website. Let's allow people to see if they can track down, and your Facebook as well.
Yeah, foodbabe.com. I'm at the Food Babe on Instagram and on Facebook and Twitter. This book is being sold everywhere where books are sold. So, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, at your local bookstore. So just go and get it. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you so much, Vani. Thanks, everybody. We're kicking off the cleanse on Friday. Stay tuned for details on that. Until then, have the best day ever. And one more announcement. Actually, I'm going to be speaking with Ari Witten at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow about energy, how you can have more of it, and how you can have more energy, not only at your fingertips, but more energy for the future, because the future is going to require that we have enough energy to get the job done. I'm David Avocado Wolfe, joined by Vani Hari, and we're wishing you the best day ever.